Death isn't one of our favorite topics most of the time, but I think it's really important because there's a lot to process when we lose somebody important to us. And so today we're going to be talking about how to honor someone who has passed away. Welcome to another episode of Charis Daily. My name is Daniel Bennett, and it's great to have you join us. I'm the Senior Executive Director of Charis Bible College, and I hope you enjoy these episodes. Our theme right now is still relationships. And as I mentioned in the intro, death isn't one of our favorite topics, but if we never think about death, it limits how we live our lives. And it's an important part of life, and it's an important thing to take time to process. And so, before I dive in, though, I do want to mention that our giveaway currently is still how to stay positive in a negative world. Again, things that aren't good happen in this world. We're supposed to be the light of this world. If we let the darkness discourage us, then we're failing because we want to be the light to other people. So we want to stay connected to our source and Jesus' kingdom and be light instead of discouraged. So I encourage you to go to charisdailygtn.com and you can get this booklet for free. Or if you're watching this in the future, you can see whatever the giveaway is in the present time. So I hope you check that out. And like I said, I want to be talking today about how to honor people who've passed away. And before I get into the specifics of this, I do want to kind of expand what I'm talking about. I'm not just talking about people that we know in person. I'm talking about everything. It's anybody who's important to us. And so, it can be people that we know in person, but it can also be people who've blessed us from a distance. I personally don't like the cynical view of the world. People say, well, if I didn't know them, who cares? Even if we didn't know them personally, they're still real people. And there's many different types of people who can have an impact on our lives. And again, I want to talk about why this is important, because the way we go about how we think of others does have a subconscious effect on how we think about ourselves and how we expect other people to think about us. And so there's many different types of people who can really have an impact on us. It could be an artist. It could be someone who makes movies, right? Whether actors or directors or the writers, where maybe a movie really connects. You really connect with an actor, with a storyteller. It could be a writer, someone's books. It could be a political figure. It could be an athlete that we are fans of. It could be a minister who's really done a lot. Maybe they're on the other side of the world, but they've shared things from their heart, from God's heart through their heart to your heart, that have really impacted you, where even if it's a one-sided relationship, you still feel very connected to them. It could be an inventor, right? Somebody who's designed things, invented things that really bless you. There's many different ways, because whenever somebody creates something, if it blesses you, if it impacts you in a positive way, you are interacting with something that was birthed in someone else's imagination and someone else's heart. And so that is part of life, is that we're benefiting from many other people. Even if we don't know them personally, it's still a valid way of appreciating people, feeling connected to people. Somebody's art is kind of like their journal. It's like you're connecting with something that was birthed from their deep, quiet moments. And if it affects you, I remember not too long ago, someone who created a show that I watched as a kid passed away. And even though I didn't know him personally, I didn't know anything about this person, but I was like, through his art, he had a big impact on my childhood. And so it's okay, right? Again, I don't think that it's healthy to say, like, it doesn't matter, I didn't know them, whatever, just a celebrity, just whatever. I think that we get more richness out of life if we take the time to truly appreciate people, even if we didn't know them personally. But it can also be people we did know personally, right? A family member, a close friend, a mentor, people like that. And so, I don't think that our goal is to become cynical. The goal in life is not to harden your heart so much you don't need comfort. Our goal should be to let the Holy Spirit comfort us, right? I want to make my heart as sensitive as possible, knowing that God is my comforter, instead of saying, like, I just numb myself so that I never need comfort. Because that's using our own strength to try to replace God, and that is very ungodly, actually. To try and say, I refuse to feel pain, because I'd rather just not think about it. I'd say, no, I'll feel the pain, but I'll also receive the healing and the comfort instantly at the same time. But I want to stay sensitive. I want a heart like God's, right? I mean, even Jesus wept Emotions aren't a bad thing. I'll break this down more here in a little bit. So again, I can care about I can care about complete strangers, right? There's times when it's a news article, you just read something bad about somebody, right? And you're like, oh, my heart goes out to that person. And I didn't even know they existed until I read this. And yet I can have compassion for them and care about them. So how much more if somebody had an impact on my life, maybe through writing books or through different things, just things that they've shared or things that they've created. So for Christians, it should be especially easy to care for people, even if we don't know them really well personally, because God's inside of us and He does know them personally, right? God loves them infinitely and He's inside of us. And so we have the ability to love any stranger, any acquaintance, any person we know from a distance. We're not limited by just natural knowledge of somebody because we've got God inside of us and He created them. They're made in His image. And so we can have a supernatural level of compassion and love for others. So first thing I want to mention is that we were not designed for loss. When we lose a loved one, again, whether it's someone we know closely or someone we don't know closely, but they've impacted us in some way, God never designed us to experience death because God isn't the author of death, right? He never wanted us to lose people. There's a reason why when we lose a loved one, we just can't put into words what we're experiencing because we weren't designed to process that, right? He never wanted us to experience that, right? Rejection and loss are two things that God never wanted us to experience, and that's why they feel so overwhelming, right? Or it can just feel like you can't put into words the pain, the emotions, all this, because your body's trying to process something that it wasn't designed to process. Your mind, your will, your emotions are trying to process something that God never intended us to process. The only way to do it is to cast our cares on Jesus. He didn't say, if you just think hard enough, this won't hurt. He's like, no, this is bad. This shouldn't have happened. I didn't want this to happen. The only way to process this for real is actually to give it to me because I can handle it. I didn't design you to handle it. Right? 1 Peter 5, verses 6 and 7 say, therefore humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, that He may exalt you in due time, casting all your care upon Him, for He cares for you. Right? So humble yourself and cast your cares. A sign of humility is casting our cares on Jesus, saying, I can't carry this. I can't process this. I can't think my way out of this pain. My brain's not what's hurt. My heart's what's hurt. I can't think myself to a solution. And so I have to cast these cares onto Him. Again, we weren't meant to process these things because some people say without death, you wouldn't enjoy life. No, death doesn't add beauty. Death ends beauty. And so God did not design this world for death. Now, again, in eternity, we don't have death, but in this world, death is still a thing that is not a reflection of God. He didn't want it. You don't need ugliness to have beauty. You don't need death to have life. These are things that are here to kill, steal, and destroy, and God's going to destroy these things later and bring back, a better world without death, without darkness. Philippians 4, verse 7 says, the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. So again, God's true peace doesn't have to make sense to your brain. It actually can't make sense to your brain, where you're like, there's no logical reason why I shouldn't be in pain right now, but I'm not. There's no logical reason why I should have peace right now, but I do, because it's peace from God that surpasses understanding. It says surpasses all understanding. Again, it's not like, I got this epiphany and I'm not sad anymore. No, that's just desensitizing ourselves, because really, when we truly need God's supernatural peace, it goes beyond what we can make sense of. It's like, it's a different story. I go more in depth on this in some courses here at Charis, but there's moments where it's like, it makes no sense why I will ever be happy again. It makes no sense why I'll ever have joy again. It makes no sense why I would ever laugh again, why I would ever, have fun again. And yet I do. And it's because it's God's peace surpasses understanding, because we live in a dark world, and yet, again, from His perspective, He knows everything, and He knows the future He has in store for us. He knows how He'll redeem things, all these different things. There's things that happen that are really bad. And we don't need just peace through logic, right? Just, I'm in pain. Someone, quick, tell me something I didn't know. It just surpasses understanding. It goes beyond our brains. Don't limit God's comfort to what you understand. Let him comfort you in ways that you don't understand. You know, in modern society, and I want to get now more to specifics about honoring those who've passed and how this affects us and how we live. But in modern society, it seems like everyone tries to get over loss as fast as possible, right? Everyone wants to avoid thinking about it as fast as possible. And many people even take pride in the concept of, oh, no, I'm fine, don't worry about me. And it's like, oh, look at that, I got over that loss in 5 minutes. Well, I got over that loss in 2 seconds. Well, I didn't even care to begin with, right? And people take pride in the fact that they're quick to move on, but I don't see that in Scripture. I don't see that as being a godly response, that we should try to just not care, to not have compassion, to not, there's an ungodly form of grieving, but there's also a godly form, which is more of like an appreciation of the significance and value of somebody and the impact, and it's more of a thankfulness as opposed to a hopeless type of pain. And again, like I said, my goal is to make my heart as sensitive as possible, and you can only do that if you trust that God is your comforter. My goal is not to desensitize myself so that when there's a loss, that's something terrible that God did not want to happen, right? That's the thing we need to remember. God does not want the thief to kill, steal, and destroy. If the thief does, that's not a good thing. We shouldn't just be like, yeah, who cares? Well, God does, right? God doesn't say, no big deal, just get over it. He's like, no, I'll give you peace that passes understanding. I'll comfort you, because he makes a big deal out of these things, right? 1 Corinthians 15, verse 55. 1 Corinthians 15, 55 says, O death, where is your sting? O Hades, where is your victory? Right? So death has lost its sting, but it's still bad, right? So again, we have hope. If someone goes to be with Christ, especially, you know, it doesn't have the same sting, but it doesn't mean that it's good. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't care. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't miss somebody. It doesn't mean that this was a good thing and who cares that it happened to them. So it's lost its sting, but it's still a bad thing. You know, God makes a big deal out of it when people die. God doesn't just gloss over it and say, like, in the light of eternity, who cares? Right? God, who's an eternal being, right? We all have beginnings. He never had a beginning. So he's already experiencing eternity, even though we don't fully have our eyes open to what that means yet. He chooses to make a big deal out of our short little temporary lives ending. He makes a big deal out of it, right? Revelation chapter 21, verse 4 says, and God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There shall be no more death, nor sorrow, nor crying. There shall be no more pain, for the former things have passed away. See, God didn't say like, oh, once you're in heaven, who cares? Get over it. It's like, no, he's going to take the time to patiently and kindly wipe away tears, and then he'll get rid of death. He didn't tell people just to like, stop crying. You know, he wipes away tears again. So there won't be tears in eternity, but at the beginning, he says he's going to wipe them away, and then he gets rid of the reasons for why tears even happen. Revelation chapter 2, verse 10 says, Jesus is saying, do not fear any of those things which you are about to suffer, talking about persecution. Indeed, the devil is about to throw some of you into prison that you may be tested, and you will have tribulation 10 days. Be faithful until death, and I will give you the crown of life. Right? So he didn't say, be faithful until death, because who really cares anyway? It's like, no, I'm going to honor for all eternity. I'm going to give you a special crown if you're persecuted and martyred for me. He makes a big deal out of this. He's like, you are paying a price that does matter. This is a big deal, and I'm going to make note of it forever that you paid this price. He makes things a big deal, and we need to value life and we need to value death because God does. If we think that these things aren't a big deal, then it's going to change how we live our life. We're just going to become kind of fatalistic. Who cares? Nothing really matters. No one's going to miss me when I leave. You know, and that's not what we see in the Word. We see that God values life. He values death. He honors those who've died good deaths, who've died deaths due to persecution. So again, God makes a big deal out of things. So if God makes a big deal out of it, our comfort shouldn't be desensitizing ourselves, right? God didn't say, just think that life doesn't matter. It's just a vapor. Right? It's like Solomon talking in Ecclesiastes where he's like, this is the carnal way of thinking. That's not how we should try to overcome things and say like, who cares? What's the big deal? No, this is a big deal, and the Holy Spirit will comfort me. And God is going to honor this. It is important. So again, God makes a big deal out of people's lives. You know, he goes out of his way in the Word to mention people by name. He loves to honor people. The whole reason there's heroes of the faith that we can talk about their stories is because God went out of his way to tell us their stories. He didn't just say like, oh yeah, that person and who cares and who cares, who cares. He's like, no, I want to tell you about David. I want to tell you about Mary. I want to tell you about Esther. I want to tell you about all these different people because he delights in honoring people. So if God loves to honor people, it's important for us to also honor people. He likes to honor people forever, right? One way he honors people is by mentioning them in the Word. And I'll say our equivalent of that is writing things down. I'll go into that more in a little bit. But he also, there was many times where, let me back up. God doesn't want us to forget important things. And it's ungodly to just move on and just let things be forgotten. God is always telling people in the Old Testament, you see, make a memorial for this, have a celebration for that. So let me show you a couple things here real quick. He doesn't want us to forget, but he also wants us to teach people, future generations, he wants us to teach our children about important things that have happened in the past. So Joshua chapter 4, this will be a handful of scriptures here. So Joshua chapter 4, verse 19, it says, when the people came up from the Jordan, on the 10th day of the first month, and they camped in Gilgal on the east of the border of Jericho. And those 12, so they walked through the Jordan River, God stopped it up and they walked through, and they grabbed 12 stones. So those 12 stones which they took out of Jordan, Joshua set up in Gilgal. Then he spoke to the children of Israel, saying, when your children ask their fathers in time to come, saying, what are these stones, right? So they built a monument. What are these stones? He said, then you shall let your children know, saying, Israel crossed over this Jordan on dry land. For the Lord your God dried up the waters of the Jordan before you until you had crossed over, as the Lord your God did to the Red Sea, which he had dried up before until we had crossed over. That all the peoples of the earth may know the hand of the Lord, that it is mighty, that you may fear the Lord your God forever. They're crossing the river and they grabbed some stones from the bottom of the river where it had been. And so they made this monument with stones from the bottom of the river. And basically saying, I don't want you to ever forget that you crossed the Jordan, right? So you crossed the Red Sea and then you crossed the Jordan, both on dry land. One was a lake or a sea, one was a river. And he's like, set up this monument so that you remember, but also so you can teach your children. And it says, so that everyone in the whole earth can know more about God. It says that you may fear the Lord your God forever, right? So saying this will help you. If not forgetting important things is important for you and for your children and their children, because it's an inspiration, it's a reminder. Well, if God did that for them, he can do this for us, right? So monuments. There's a place for monuments. I'm not saying every single human in the whole world needs monuments, but there is a place for monuments as reminders. Exodus chapter 12, verse 14, God says, so this day, talking about the Passover, shall be to you a memorial, and you shall keep it as a feast to the Lord throughout your generations. You shall keep it as a feast by an everlasting ordinance. So you see in the previous one, monuments, like physical things you can look at as reminders. And here you see a feast. So it's a yearly reminder, like a holiday and a meal, is I want you to eat this every single year as a reminder, right? And we do the same thing, right? We celebrate Easter, Resurrection Sunday, we celebrate Christmas, we celebrate other things. This is important. God is a fan. I mean, he mandates, do this as a yearly reminder just to stir it up every single year, right? So there's a place for that, that we should go out of our way sometimes setting up yearly things where it's like, we're going to remember this we're going to remember this person. We're going to have Thanksgiving Day. We're going to have, times where we celebrate great people who did great things. Mark 14 verses 6 through 9 says, when the woman anointed him for burial, it says, but Jesus said, let her alone. Why do you trouble her? She has done a good work for me. For you have the poor with you always, and whenever you wish, you may do good to them, and do them good. But me you do not have always. She has done what she could. She has come beforehand to anoint my body for burial. Assuredly I say to you, wherever this gospel is preached in the whole world, what this woman has done will also be told as a memorial to her. So he's not saying this is a memorial to me, he's saying this story will be shared through all generations around the whole world. What she did to me is so special. He's like, I'm going to honor her. I'm going to set up a memorial. This is in the word specifically to honor this woman for what she did. So God's not against other people being immortalized, other people having memorials and people having reminders where we learn from their example. In 1 Corinthians 11, verse 25, it says, in the same manner, he also took the cup after supper, saying, this cup is the new covenant of my blood. This is communion. This do as often as you drink it in remembrance of me. So he's saying, one of the ways I want you not to forget me, forget what I did for you, is to have this, this tradition, this thing that you do in remembrance of me consistently. So these are important ways of remembering people. So now I want to get to some practical tips here. So these are kind of scriptural foundation for what I'm going to share, is that one way to honor people who've passed away is to be intentional about remembering them forever. Not just saying like, oh, I'll think about them for about 3 weeks and then I'll just move on and I'll remember them like once every 15 years. No, it's if you want to honor somebody, it's going out of our way to say, no, I want to set some things up. I want some visual reminders. I want some, traditional reminders, like, every year thinking about this, whatever else. That's good. That's important. So it could be a yearly celebration of something. It could be writing things down, right? Or nowadays, not just writing, but filming, recording, other ways. Recording or writing your memories of this person, or stories about them, right? Or writing down your emotions about this person, your thoughts about them, maybe writing down or recording how they impacted you. These are ways to honor somebody so you don't forget, right? So if you say, this is how this person impacted my life and why I'm so thankful for them and how awesome they were. Write those things down because, it's not just for you, so that way you can reread that sometimes or rewatch that sometimes and remember, but it's also to pass it along to future generations, right? Personally, I wish every single human wrote a memoir or an autobiography or something, because how cool would it be to stay connected with people from the past and say, wow, this great-great-great-grandparent, here's their thoughts, here's their journal, here's things that God did in their life, here's things that they did. It's powerful. And even reading old letters, right? I like to read letters from founding fathers. It's interesting to kind of see to get into their minds a little bit and see how they related, where they're not just like these historical people who did things, but they're a real person with real thoughts. So that's one way to honor people, is to write things down, record things, capture things, set up feasts. Another way is thinking about what was important to them, right? What was their mission? What were their values? What were their priorities? And thinking about that and saying, like, is there anything I can do to help them succeed in what they were trying to accomplish, right? If they created things, another way is that if they created things, to spend time on those things, whatever it may be, right? If they wrote books, read their books. If they painted, look at their paintings. If they preached, listen to their messages. Right? If they told funny anecdotes, maybe share their anecdotes with others. Remember their jokes. If they created music, writing it or performing it, right? Listen to their music. Someone's creativity is a way of reconnecting with them. When someone creates something, it can outlast them. And so that's one way to honor people, is to let their creativity, their creations, whatever sort, re-inspire us. Because that's the thing, is that if I can let someone, because I've been ministered to by people who died hundreds, thousands of years ago. And when I let them re-inspire me, when I let myself learn from them or appreciate something that they created or something that they did, now they're still bearing fruit through me, right? Well, if I got inspiration from this person, then anything I do inspired by that, now I'm co-laboring with them again. Again, when someone passes, when a believer passes, they become part of that great cloud of witnesses. And so it's like, hey, now they're cheering me on, but also because they inspired me, or helped me, or passed along wisdom to me. Now, when I do things, they're part of that. So it's a way to honor them, is that I'm helping pass along. They're bearing fruit with me and through me. So it's not the ideal just to say I'm going to move on as fast as possible. Like, again, I'm not talking about wallowing in pain forever. I'm talking about honoring somebody and making a big deal out of their life, making a big deal out of their sacrifice or what they created, what they poured their lives into, right? Because the way we think about others is how we subconsciously think others will think about us or should think about us, right? If we say, well, when I die, or if we say, when you die, do you want people to say to themselves, I'm fine, no big deal, let's move on and forget them? No, ideally, you'd be like, oh, I hope my life made an impact on people. And I hope that it was a blessing. I hope that there's things that I did that will continue to bless other people for generations, right? I hope there's things I do in my life that will bless my kids even after I'm gone, bless my grandkids, great-grandkids, but also the world as a whole. And so if we would like that for ourselves, then we should do that for others, where we say, I'm not going to let this be lost on us, right? We want to remember someone's legacy, someone's what they passed down, what they cared about, what they created. All right, so Hebrews 12 verse 1 is where it talks about the great cloud of witnesses. And again, they're still cheering us on. And then when one day we pass along and we're part of the great cloud of witnesses, we'll be thrilled that other people are still doing things that were ministered to or blessed by us in some way. So again, if we don't honor people, it means we don't understand their value. And if we don't understand their value, it really shows that we don't understand our own value. If we move on and act like it's no big deal, if I'm like, if you passing's no big deal, that means when I'm passing, it's no big deal. But that's not how God sees it. God sees it as when this person passes, it's a big deal. Let's make a big deal out of it. When we pass, it's a big deal because our life is valuable, which means that when our life is no longer in this world, that is an important moment in history, right? The world becomes different when you enter it, right? When people are born, the world's never going to be the same. When people die, the world's never going to be the same. It's important to appreciate that and not just move on as fast as possible. Now, to share a quick story, a quick conversation, is that many years ago, maybe 15-ish years ago, I was doing missions and I almost got run over. It was a very close call. I won't get into the whole story right now, but I was very, very close to getting killed. And someone told me, I was kind of chatting with somebody afterwards, and they said, I would have felt so bad for your parents. And I was like, that's fine, but what about me? And they're like, oh, well, and I was like, that sounds painful, right? And they're like, oh, well, you'd be fine. You'd be with Jesus. And I'm like, well, I would be fine. I would be with Jesus. But, not living in this world anymore is a big deal, right? This is the only chance I get for all eternity to live by faith, right? To do things without seeing all the evidence right there. It's also the only chance I get in all eternity to interact with people and maybe help more people go to heaven. And so even though I won't have tears in eternity, Jesus would have to wipe them, because if we go before our time, then that isn't a good thing. We shouldn't just make light of that. It is a big deal if people make sacrifices, right? I mean, John 15, verse 13, greater love has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for his friends. If that's the greatest love, it means that it is the greatest sacrifice. Our lives actually are very valuable, and God honors when we lay them down, right? Martyrdom wouldn't be a big deal if our lives weren't a big deal, but it is because they are, right? So again, his kingdom is such a bigger deal, but don't forget that this world does matter, and that laying down our lives is a beautiful, precious gift to God. And it's not just about in death, but also in life, how we live, not just in how we die. And so again, it is a big deal. God makes it a big deal. So my encouragement, right? Well, I'll sum up really quick, is don't try to get over a loss as fast as possible. That's not the goal. Let God comfort you instead of hardening your heart and trying to get over the pain. Just say, no, I'm going to feel the pain and the comfort, so it's a wash. So I'm not lost in pain. Again, there's no sting to death for believers, but it's still not a good thing, and it's good to have comfort instead of just ignoring it. Be intentional about remembering people and passing it along so other generations can know them also. Stir up ways that they impacted your life so that you can kind of be re-inspired by them and let them become part of the fruit that you produce and appreciate their value, right? So again, it's not about moving on as fast as possible, but make things a big deal. Let things be a big deal. Know that your life is valuable, and that when you move on from this world, it is a big deal for this world. And God will make a big deal out of it for eternity. So real quick before I leave, again, how to stay positive in a negative world. I encourage you to get this free booklet. You can go to charisdailygtn.com. I hope this has been helpful to you. I know it's kind of an unusual topic, but again, I hope it's a blessing. Have a great rest of your day. I'll see you next time.